What was your I'm in a toxic family moment? When I moved in with my so and noticed she called her family for things I would never call my own for because she actually likes them and doesn't see communicating with them as an obligation, but rather because she wanted them to be part of her everyday life. This is something I noticed with my husband too. He talks to his family almost daily and has a good familiar relationship with his parents. I talk to my family maybe twice a year and it fills me with dread. Doing family stuff with him is hard and it makes me uncomfortable to be around a normal family. Like I just don't know how to act lol. My mom said I love you at the end of a phone conversation when I was 22 and I realized it was the first time she ever said that. My dad said he was sorry for something he did for the first time in 27 years a couple months ago. I still tear up a bit when I reread his text. When I realized what sex was and that my family shouldn't be doing it to me. Not kidding. F***ed up childhood. Stories like yours always break my heart. I'm so sorry you went through that and I hope you're doing as well as you can. Told my mom I was depressed and she basically told me to deal with it myself. That was 4 years ago and I'm still having a shitty time of it. A while ago my mum saw my cuts. She pointed to them and said all whilst pulling a sad face. Then proceeded to carry on with her day. When my overly religious grandma tried to defend her blatant favoritism of my older sister by telling me that I was born evil. If she is still alive, wait until she is at her deathbed and lean in and growl Satan sends his regards. He will see you soon enough in your most demonic voice. Before laughing like a maniac and crawling backwards out of the room. Pyrotechnics and smoke also helps on the effect. I mean, it's fun to think about at least. My first memory is of my parents fighting when I was 3. I remember my mom looking at my dad and yelling this is why we're getting a divorce. They separated when I was 2, but took some time to figure out custody, as well as the actual finalization of their divorce. My mom was always so angry and would scream, throw things, and tell me consistently she didn't want me around. I finally had a breaking point with my mom the day before I turned 17. We got into a huge fight and I finally realized that she was just taking out the aggression of her past on me. I realized she had been blocking out the abuse she put me through, and finally brought it to her attention. I know her mother was an abusive alcoholic, and she kept perpetuating this cycle of abuse. What triggered the whole realization was when I dated someone for the first time when I was 16. And my BF's mom treated me like her own. It was the first time I felt welcome in a home. She made sure I ate because she knew I wasn't eating properly at home. She always had a bed made for me in case I ever needed a place to stay. And would always check in with my BF to make sure I was okay when I went home. I moved out the month I graduated high school. And I have not gone back to her house. When I found out a lot of my family members are child predators and everyone knows but no one talks about it. My family is similar. My mom had to leave her family for several reasons. For example, she is a lesbian and no one in the family accepted that. What made her leave and never go back was after one of her cousins was caught naked with me. I was a baby and have no memory of it. When my mom flipped out everyone was just like, well, he's family. He's just a little weird. You would think being a pedophile would be enough to disown someone. Nope, you still get invited to Thanksgiving. God forbid you're a lesbian though. My mom makes up lies then makes me look like the liar. It's called gaslighting. It's also just conveniently not remembering that she agreed to something previously. Whenever my mom would always tell me that I love my friends more than my family every time I get home from hanging out with my friends. Note that I seldom do leave the house to hang out with them, once every other week tops because I'm mostly introverted. It's even worse if I go out for 2 consecutive days or more SMH. It's suffocating and stupid. Really. For reference, I'm a boomer. So I've seen a ton of changes here in the dear old US of A. When I was in grade school, we were on vacation in Arkansas. Driving by a building I must assume was a diner burger joint of some kind. BC it was visible from the road. Even more conspicuous was the enormous sign reading colored served in the rear with a big arrow. I was learning to read and Practicing. Read the sign aloud. My father, who was driving, nodded his head and said, "Exactly as it should be." Double quote. Even though I was only 6. That was my wake-up call. Meeting regular parents and witnessing them actually be good to their kids. Help them. Love them and teach them valuable lessons about life. Not yelling for every small mistake they did. Also now realizing that not every raised hand is about to hit you, sometimes it's there to pet you. But unfortunately for me it wasn't the case. As a dad to a nearly 4-year-old, I can't imagine the mentality it would take to do that to a child. I am sorry to hear it happened to you. Hopefully later life has turned out better. Rooting for you. When my friend pointed out that most people are allowed to shower every day without having to negotiate it. That's so f***ing strange. It's the type of unnecessary strange that makes me want to smash faces in. Please tell me you grew up in abject poverty. Because only that would that type of behavior be understandable. Every time I said I like this or that, I got immediately criticized or questioned or made fun of to make me feel like shit. Same place. I was in 2nd or 3rd grade and got mocked relentlessly because my favorite movie was Spirit. A stupid horse movie. And then even worse when I wanted a horse plate for my birthday. I was embarrassed as a 7-year-old to like horses and ashamed to say a horse movie was my favorite. Sad. When my mom and dad finally separated because they finally admitted that all that fighting wasn't normal. I talked to them in my young teens about how I hate how they fight so much. And my mom said all married couples fight like that and that it was normal. Now I'm 18 and they separated this year. And they realized it is not normal or healthy to have discussions that involve screaming, tears, clenched fists and everything short of physically harming each other nearly every day. Neither of them are abusive. They are both good parents, but they were just in a bad relationship and thought that staying together would make me and my sisters happier. When in reality I wish they would have separated years ago. They brought out the worst in each other. And my mom came out as lesbian, so part of the reason she was angry all the time was from repressing her sexuality. I was 9 and I was really nice to poor guy selling shirts out of the back of his truck. My dad pulled me away and told me directly, "It's great to be nice to people, Chris, but be mean too. You want people to be a little scared of you." Even at 9 I was like, bruh, that's not great, and it really was an interaction that shaped our relationship. I went on to teach. Have a vibrant friend group. Every year a dozen of us meet up for New Year's and we're in the 10th year this year. And generally I love people. It's in my work and in every fiber of my life. He died alone of an overdose about 10 years ago. The funeral would have been basically empty if not for all the friends who came to console me. My wife helped me come to the realization. Out of myself and my 2 brothers. I was the only one to have never been arrested. Yet I was the only my parents did not buy a car for. I had to be moved out of the house. 2 f***ing states away and teach myself how to drive illegally to get my driver's license. But my brothers were sure taken care of and driving to school on their own. I had my wife, girlfriend at the time, over to my parents for Christmas dinner. My mom offers me a glass of champagne. About 2 months before my 21st birthday. No big deal. Right? My stepdad proceeds to throw a temper tantrum about how I'm underage and not in his house and all this shit. Well, a couple months later found out he bought my little brother, his biological child, a bottle of high-end bourbon for his 18th birthday. When I was in the service they had a whole bunch of deep sea fishing trips and pro sports games they would go to without even so much as asking if I could come. They didn't come to my boot camp graduation that I offered to pay for. Didn't see me off when I was deployed. Wasn't there when I came back. Great times. Much more shitty I can't think of right now. When I was 4 years old my mom told me that my parents divorced because dad was a drug alcohol addict. She neglected to mention her own problems, but suffice to say I've been stuck in the middle of their drama for 31 years now as an only child. I remember my dad not showing up to my school's Thanksgiving and eating alone. I remember sitting in the car watching my parents scream at each other. This happened again in high school when they put me in a mental hospital and the therapist tried to do family therapy. Lol. Now they fight over my child. I'm 23. But my opinion doesn't matter for I'm the youngest in the family. Own my own home. Own my own car and have a good job. But my family still pushes me around, especially in my house. Being the youngest sucks. It took my therapist using the word. My mom has had epilepsy since I was 1. I'm 24, and cognitive dysfunction. She's a toxic manipulator and my dad and brother have severe anger issues. I'm afraid of the latter two because they've been violent in the past. I'm struggling so much to get through the next year till I can move out. I can't wait to not walk on eggshells and not dread my days off work. In general, my siblings constantly criticize and mock me for everything I do. They will both gang up on me when all three of us are together. Christmas is no longer enjoyable. My dad abused my mum and my siblings as kids. He refuses to believe he ever did it. My mum saw my cuts and didn't try to get me help. I'm 17. I live with mum. Just me and her. Some days I think about going to live with my dad for a while. Or with my sister when she offers. But then I remember either way I'll be unhappy. The day I joined a specialty school and was informed that it was not, in fact, normal for my father and brother to relentlessly mock me for my autism. Literally spent 15 years being called horrid things and being patronized for my interests. And I legitimately thought that was just what male family members did. Because my mother would never stop them. When my mother and I were on a heated phone call with each other and she said how much I hurt her and I had the courage to say, well, what about how you hurt me? And her response was, well, yeah, I meant to hurt you. Big eye opened that one. We had a missionary family staying with us. And the parents actually got input from their kids. The entire concept of being allowed to have my own feelings and thoughts was so foreign. My parents also treated us so much better when we had guests. Not getting beaten was so nice. My aunt called my dad to tell him that I was basically going to hell because I didn't believe the earth was 6,000 years old and that dinosaurs are fake. As you may have guessed, she's a real gem at Christmas time. I was at a family gathering a couple years ago for Christmas and my uncle got genuinely mad when I refused a beer from him. I was 13. My parents stood up for me, so I definitely appreciate that. Parents fighting every time they're in the same room and one of them always complains about the other. I'm 21 and they still do this. When I read the definition for parentification somewhere on Reddit and quarantine, my father is paralyzed and my mom can be childish or immature at times. But she tries her best and works 2 jobs. I have been taking care of my sister since she entered kindergarten, which included waking her up, making sure she was dressed and cleaned, and making her meals. Now that we're in quarantine, I do everything around the house, cooking, cleaning, laundry, dishes, etc. And I sometimes have to do grocery runs. I hadn't known this wasn't normal until recently, and I honestly don't know how to feel about it. I was about 23/22 when my mom got drunk and starting throwing my stuff on the front lawn and yelling at me to move out. The only thing I can recall doing was taking a shower before work. She pushed me outside and I just stood there looking at my stuff and thought, I have to get out of here and I can never come back. Double quote. That was like 13 years ago. I found a room to rent on Craigslist. Went back to school and got a career. Got married. And bought a house. I'm doing good now, but I never returned home until after my mom died. My mom attacking me and lying to the police to make it seem like I prompted the fight and threatened me a criminal record. I'm not someone who fights, I'm just a lil nerd. I have a few. The number of times my parents would mention suicide. My mum ranted to me all the time about how miserable her life was. How she'd throw herself off a bridge someday, or her favorite, she'd overdose on pills but was nervous she'd just get very ill from that. This was a frequent thing she said to me. Throughout childhood. It took me to adulthood to realize how f***ed up that is. My dad would often storm off in arguments with her too and take kitchen knives with him. I got quite depressed as a teenager, and when I tried to speak with them about it they complained that we're too tired to listen to my shit. Double quote. I have more if I think about it, but I get very angry when I dwell on it. Not crying when I was told my mom died. Realizing the reason I hate feet and being tickled is because my ex-brother who molested me had a foot and tickling fetish. Having 3 moms, 2 alive? Watching my first mom shoot up when I was 3. Being coerced into saying I wanted to stab stepmom. Then almost sent to juvie. Then a group home community. There's so much more. Now the biggest issue is my latest mom being condescending and taking our phones for missing like 1-2 chores. And never getting them back. Better than abuse though. I was at my grandmother's house and there was a guy outside working in the yard. I'd say roughly mid to late 30s. Kinda disheveled appearance. And he had talked to my parents about payment for work and what else had to be done and all that jazz. He goes back to working and my mom comments on his appearance and how he may have not went to school. I called her out on it. Especially since my parents go to church and keep Christian paraphernalia around the house. She stumbled for an excuse but couldn't find one to justify her behavior. My dad in particular tends to talk shitty about anyone who either he feels is beneath him or that he feels is dumb. Double quote. I got beat because my parents and older sister thought I was gay. My younger sister comes out and they love her. I don't care anymore. My therapist stopped trying to get us to communicate and started giving me tips to survive until I could move out. When my mom told me to stop coming in and talking about the things I enjoyed because they didn't care and it was being disruptive. There were other signs before that, but that's one that seared into the back of my mind. Mom and dad would vent about each other and their own problems to me and made me feel like I was the family therapist. It was some pretty serious stuff sometimes and I felt like I had to fix it, but I couldn't tell anybody because it'd be breaking their trust in me. After years of therapists telling me it was unhealthy but not helping me figure out how to fix the situation, I tried to move out. But their control and guilt brought me back home. Still struggling with it, but working on getting them to talk to each other more and setting up boundaries. I have a lot of these and they're all pretty crazy. But I'll go with the first one. When I was 6 years old, my aunt, who was my guardian, faked my grandmother's death. She lied to all of us. Local churches, her friends, and strangers for sympathy and money. She wrote to multiple people asking for support. She needed money for a headstone and the funeral, etc. People bought into it. You can imagine our surprise a year later when we received a letter from our grandma saying she was coming to see us. Not sure if this counts. But my siblings constantly joke about things I say and do. Sometimes it's genuinely funny. But other times it annoys me. When it annoys me, I try to tell my siblings to stop. But they haven't. My mother doesn't really back me up in those instances either. Part of me wants to believe that I'm being overly sensitive. But I can't help how I react to things. And I always feel bad afterwards. Most recently, my in-laws lied and knowingly exposed us to COVID-19 despite knowing I'm high risk and that our daughter may have inherited the same condition. But I'm the unreasonable one for saying it was a selfish thing to do. Family basically put everyone's paycheck together and whatever was extra after bills it was more or less fair game to use for my parents. So I constantly got my paychecks drained. Tried saving money up by saying I had a little less than what I did. Full stop. After a year had about 1k saved up. My mom took my card to buy dinner, proceeded to check the balance on my card and sees I have a lot more money than I was telling them. Used my card to buy over 150 of food that I got none of, and then kicks me out of the house for making the family do without. Imagine not being proud of your kid for trying to save money. Not me but my GF. After a year of being together I invited her over for Christmas. After all the gift opening, the family sat down for food and we were all laughing and having a great time, and I looked over at her and she was quiet and just looked kinda shocked. We get in my car and she said, "Is this how Christmas is every year?" I told her yes. She said this is nothing like my family's style. We open gifts, get into arguments, and then take the gifts back. Being vegan. My relatives, and even some people in my close family, constantly make jokes that make me feel depressed. And they're just jerks in general about it. At 40 years old. Visiting my parents for a few weeks with my kids. The usual dynamics at play. And all of a sudden it hit me. And I said it out loud. I never feel worse about myself than I do when I'm here with you. That comment prompted a minor shitstorm. I left 2 days later with my kids and spent a week vacationing elsewhere with my kids. I haven't been back since. I'm really sad at how things have worked out. My parents seem content to make no effort to talk to me or see me or their grandkids. I love my parents and sincerely believe they did their best. I miss them. But my mental health has improved dramatically since I stopped including them in my life. Each time my brother got out of jail prison, 4x, there was a party with at least 20 people including all my siblings, parents, etc. But when I graduated college and grad school, the first of my family to do either, only my grandmother showed up. But if anyone needs money, a favor, a go-between, or to borrow something, guess who they run to? When my mom opened my mail, took out a credit card check, made it out to herself for $4,000, and put it in front of me to sign while I was in the hospital getting chemotherapy. I did not sign it, and she was very angry and told me how I owed her. We really didn't have any kind of a relationship after that because I was just trying to stay alive and the stress was too much. Then my sister started jumping all over me because I was asleep and didn't answer the phone when she called me. Because I was tired from the cancer and the treatment. Yeah, we're still not talking.